Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. 5 most important true freshmen for this Auburn program heading into 2024. One of my favorite kind of episodes heading into a college football season where, for those who've been rocking with the fellas for the last couple of years, we talk extensively about the recruiting trail, specifically in the offseason. And now we get all of these kids that we talked about as recruits, putting on the helmet for this Auburn program. Want to go through the 5 freshmen that, again, I think the correlation is with talent. This is not necessarily my favorite 5 freshmen for this Auburn program, but it's the 5 freshmen that I think are going to have to play a role for this Auburn program in the 2024 season. Fired up to get into it. Now, before we do, and as always, one to the Auburn fans, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. There's a lot of really talented true freshmen that are going to be on this Auburn roster. A lot of them are going to play some sort of role in the 2024 season. I left off some names that I don't feel good about leaving off. So I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section, maybe some names that I might be sleeping on. And of course, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Cannot thank the Auburn fans enough for all the support y'all have shown the boys over the last couple of weeks and months, especially with how busy Auburn was on the recruiting trail. It's been a blast talking this program. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start at 5, work our way down to 1. Unfortunately, number 1 is not going to be any sort of surprise for a lot of Auburn fans, but let's start with number 5, and that's going to be cornerback Jay Crawford. Now, why Jay Crawford is making the list, at least in my mind, for a top 5 most important true freshman, one, he's probably going to be in the 2 deep for this Auburn program at some point during this football season. I think he might start with the emergence of J.C. Hart. Maybe he's in the 3 deep. Jay Crawford's going to have to play for this Auburn program at some point, probably in SEC play. And why I'm so optimistic that, Jay Crawford can come in and play early for this Auburn program is this kid was extremely polished coming out of high school. And we broke down the film of Jay Crawford coming out of high school when he committed to Auburn. We kind of all said the same thing and said, this kid looks like he can play college football. He's not necessarily the most physically gifted cornerback in terms of the size, the long speed. That being said, he is extremely smooth as an operating cornerback, really knows how to be sticky in man coverage. I think most importantly is really physical. And you might not necessarily assume that given the 5'11", 175 frame. This kid wants to put hands on wide receivers at the line of scrimmage, jam them early in the route trees, and then knows how to go play the football when it's in the air. Those are a lot of those things that keep a lot of talented true freshmen off the football field as cornerbacks, not having those ball skills, not having to be sticky. And everything you've heard from Jay Crawford kind of going through fall camp says this kid is ready to play in the SEC. Is he going to start for Auburn as a true freshman? No, probably not. We feel really good about guys like Kayin Lee and Keontae Scott, but there's a really good chance that Jay Crawford is in the 2 deep at the boundary cornerback for this Auburn program. And I think he's ready to play. I don't know if he has the highest ceiling of any quarterback of the cornerbacks in the 2024 class, but he was one of the more college-ready cornerbacks year 1, especially in the SEC. Give me Jay Crawford coming in at number 5. Going to number 4, we're going to talk about linebacker Demarcus Riddick, a guy that we've talked a lot about during this offseason as somebody that I could see working their way into the 2 deep as well, where you look at Eugene Asante and Austin Keys and say, we ain't got no question mark about who these starting linebackers are going to be for this Auburn program. But you look at the 2 deep and say, all right, we landed some veteran linebackers in the transfer portal who are known commodities, give a higher floor to this Auburn program. I think it made a ton of sense. You don't necessarily want to have to rely on a true freshman like Demarcus Riddick to be in the 2 deep, but I think he is talented enough to just find his way onto the football field at some point for this Auburn program, and specifically with this DJ Durkin defense, where we know DJ wants to get extremely aggressive with the blitzes that he's going to ask his linebackers to do. You go back and look at the film from Demarcus Riddick. This kid has so many different unique skill sets. One, he's a lead in space. I mean, he can operate in coverage, whether it's man or zone. He can rush the passer off the edge. He can play that overhang linebacker spot. Because of that versatility and the amount of different ways that you can use Demarcus Riddick, I don't think he's going to be an all-down linebacker for Auburn. I think he probably needs to add a little bit more size and a little bit more physicality before he's a starting linebacker for this Auburn program. But you talk about specific packages where you can trot Demarcus Riddick on and ask him to do things that, quite frankly, you can't ask a lot of other linebackers to do. I think Demarcus Riddick can do some of those things, specifically rushing the passer. And there's a lot of film, a lot of good film of Demarcus Riddick coming off the edge and being an elite caliber edge rusher. And so I look at Demarcus Riddick and say, DJ Durkin's going to find a way to get this kid on the football field, not to mention he's probably going to be very good in the special teams game for this Auburn program. Going to number 3, and a guy that I'll just kind of raise my hand and say I didn't peg him as a year 1 contributor for this Auburn program. That's defensive lineman Malik Blocton, who committed to Auburn at 6'3", 265. He's up to 6'3", 291 pounds on the Auburn roster. And from what you heard in fall camp, this is a guy that's going to play within the rotation for this Auburn program. One of our big question marks was, what does the depth look like for Auburn on the inside of the defensive line? They went out and added, a lot of veteran bodies on the inside of the defensive line, but we're kind of looking for some of those difference makers. I think Malik Blocton could be one of those guys as a true freshman. One, it sounds like he is ready to play in the SEC from a physicality standpoint. But number 2, you go back to the high school film of Malik Blocton, he set a school record as an interior defensive lineman with 118 tackles during his senior year. He had 30 tackles for a loss, 14 sacks. Malik Blocton can get it done rushing the passer, although not necessarily a 300-pound monster body on the inside. He's a very, very good athlete that plays with really good pad level. And when you can play with good leverage and good pads, if you're 290, you can still be really effective. And it sounds like Malik Blocton, from what we've heard during fall camp, is going to be a contributor for Auburn on the inside of the defensive line. You're going to have to rotate a lot of bodies on the inside of the defensive line. I think Malik Blocton is going to be part of that rotation. And if you can have a guy like Malik Blocton that comes onto the field for 15 to 20 snaps a game, gives you really good reps, I think that's massive for this Auburn defense, specifically with some of our concerns about the depth on the inside of the defensive line. Going to number 2, and it had to be my guy, right? Amaris Williams. The Auburn fans who've been rocking with the boys really for the last 12 months know. Now, I've thought Amaris Williams, even back when he was committed to Florida, should have been a top 50 national kid. Finally worked his way up to getting that 5th star, according to 24/7 Sports. He 6'2", 269 pounds. This kid played running back at the high school level. He's about as athletically gifted as you'll see a defensive lineman and edge rusher coming out of high school, but more importantly, physically ready, kind of like Keldrick Falk was to play early in the SEC. Now, I don't think he's going to start for Auburn, where you look at the edge rushers and say, all right, Falk, Jalen McLeod, Kieran Crawford looks really good from Arkansas State, but you talk about maybe that 4th guy off the bench in that edge rusher room, I think you're looking at it with Amaris Williams. And I think what lets Amaris Williams play early for Auburn is that he's really good against the run. You saw him physically impose his will in that spring game as a early enrollee true freshman. He's only going to get physically a little bit more stronger during the summer workouts and going into fall camp. This kid is a freaky, freaky athlete, and he's going to be hard to keep off the field for this Auburn defensive line. A guy that you could mention is Jamonta Waller as well. The reason I left Jamonta Waller off the list is I don't think he's as physically developed as Amaris Williams. I think Jamonta Waller is going to play, but I think who's going to play more? I think it's going to be Amaris Williams because I think he's a little bit more physically ready to play in the SEC. Going to number 1, not a surprise, but a couple of nuanced takes that I want to add with Cam Coleman. Why Cam Coleman is so important to this Auburn wide receiver. And one, I kind of expect him to be the wide receiver 1. I get that putting lofty expectations on the true freshman, but he deserves all the lofty expectations that he's getting. I mean, this kid is truly a difference maker as a true freshman. God don't make many Cam Colemans. Now, I think why Cam Coleman is so important is not only can he create and manufacture explosive plays himself, but I think Cam Coleman enters in and is that, deeper third threat that opposing defenses have to respect. You go back to 2023, something we talked about a lot. Who was that deeper third threat for Auburn that if you were a defensive coordinator and your safeties, who do you have to respect in that Auburn wide receiver room last year? The answer was nobody. And so what was the result? You saw a lot of safeties coming into the box, kind of clogging up that short intermediate range, especially affecting the run game. When you don't have this kind of guy, it starts getting really hard to design and run an offense. Now that Cam Coleman's playing, not only is he going to make plays down the field for this Auburn program, I think he'll be the leading receiver for this Auburn offense. I think more importantly, he's a guy that if you're a safety, if you're a defensive coordinator, you got to respect what Cam Coleman can do. And if you don't respect it, he's going to burn you by himself. But if you do respect it, it's going to open up that middle of the field for a guy like Rivaldo Fairweather, for a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith, for the run game, like with Jarquez Hunter. Cam Coleman brings much more than just what the numbers will show on the stat sheet. And I think that's the real value that you get with Cam Coleman. Obviously, the touchdowns, the 20-yard plays, those are going to come. But I think him opening up this offense, creating a little bit more space for other guys on this Auburn offense, that's the real value that I think you get with a wide receiver like Cam Coleman. That'll do it for the list. Left a lot of really good true freshmen off. I think, Hugh Freeze has done a really good job getting this roster right, where you don't have to rely on as many true freshmen. And that's not where you want to be as a roster. If you have true freshmen that are good enough to play, you go play them. But you don't want to have to go into a season and say, hey, we need Connor Lew to be a really good true freshman center. Good thing he was, but you don't want to be in that spot. You go back to last year, Connor Lew or Keldrick Falk, Kayan Lee, Auburn had to play some freshmen. All three, though, that's probably a bad example because all three of those were pretty damn good football players and ready. That being said, I think Auburn's in a much better spot where, hey, we don't need to play these true freshmen if they're not ready. But I think you got a lot of freshmen on this Auburn roster that can contribute year one for this Auburn program. We'll cut it down there. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.